Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Welcome back, Thanasi.
Well, I've got two words for you. Let's get ready to enjoy.
Well, lovely. Nice change of pace. In today's episode, we preview WWE's King and Queen of the Ring event while giving our thoughts on who we think will win the respective tournaments. We will broadly give our full predictions for the King and Queen of the Ring event as well, before later on also discussing our thoughts on who we think will emerge victorious at AEW's own event this weekend, Double or Nothing. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. And if there is a certain topic that interests you more than the other, please feel free to jump ahead to it using the timestamps in the description below. On that note, Thanasi, let's dive straight into the content. And to start off with, I want to discuss the events that occurred on SmackDown. Now, before we get into the King and Queen of the Ring tournament updates, I wanted to discuss the Cody Rhodes Logan Paul contract signing. Now, obviously, last week on the show, we were sort of debating who we think could win and what our thoughts were on the booking decision. And it turns out that through this scheming on Logan Paul's part, the US Championship is no longer on the line. So this is a straight WWE Championship match. How do you feel about that development and the way they handled it in the segment itself?
Well, for one thing, I don't know whether to phrase it this way that they've insulted our intelligence or that it was all a waste of time, because basically our whole discussion last week was predicated on the idea that, like, what's the point of having it winner take all, right? It's a lose-lose situation. So we as wrestling fans, put some time and effort into thinking this through, and then they've just taken it all away. Now, I get that in a normal world, what this actually means is that it's supposed to put some heat on Logan Paul for having done that. But the thing is, there's just relief that it's actually a better booking decision. And if we had done this a week ago, we could have fast forwarded all this discussion to then. So I'm trying to figure out how I feel. Like, if I feel like my intelligence has been insulted, or if once again it's just another just delaying the inevitable, I suppose, which apparently is going to be Cody going over.
I will give my 2 cents on it as well. I do not have an issue with WWE making changes as time goes along, as long as it feels like it's fitting to the characters. And in the case of Logan Paul, he is the sort of bastard that you would expect to try and wiggle his way out of defending his own championship and trying to maximize his own gain. So I feel like in character, this actually was a a suitable uh alteration to the situation, and I actually don't mind the decision. And I think as well, this gives a bit of good heat on Logan Paul, so that now we do want to see Cody Rhodes beat him and, really not just defend his honor and defend his title, but really give Logan Paul that beating that we all know he deserves. So I actually don't mind the change. Plus, you know, Cody Rhodes, this idea of him, wanting to complete the Grand Slam of championships by winning the US title, is admirable, but it doesn't mean it has to happen now. So I don't mind that being delayed. And, so I feel like even though it does change the game a little bit, I actually think in the long run, this was the smartest decision to take in regards to this specific match. Like, if they were going to have this match, I think they've handled it the best way possible, where Cody can still win and it doesn't feel like anyone's losing out on something.
But wouldn't best situation possible have been if they had just done this in the first place instead of teasing a winner take all? Like, do you think that teasing a winner take all and then taking it away was a better booking decision than just make it for the solely for one strap from the off?
I do, because I think this gives extra heat on Logan Paul, and it it's like they answered in advance. Why is the US champion challenging the WWE champion without having their title on the line as well? I feel like if they just did say, oh, they're going to have a WWE Championship match, we would all be saying, hang on, he's already got a title. Why is he getting to challenge for the other one? He should be defending it. So I feel like the tease helped add to the context in the situation. I feel like they avoided what would have been the inevitable, this is bullshit, Logan Paul's not defending his title situation by pretending, or at least by having Cody Rhodes act as the fans' voice of, this must be for everything. If he's challenging me, that must mean he's also putting his on the line. So I think because he's a heel, and because he's not just a heel, he's also like a prick heel, that this fits in character with him. It's not like Logan Paul's a Gunter where he actually wants to show he is the dominant force. He goes about it in a different way.
Yeah, I still think he's holding the belt hostage, right? Like, because I'm looking at his stats right now. He took it off of Rey Mysterio in November, defended it in late January. So it took November, December, January, basically 3 months for him to defend it the first time. That he didn't defend it again until early April, so another 2 months. And we're now in late May. It's been another couple of months. Like, come on, let's give it to LA Knight already.
I hope Money in the Bank will see a change because I don't think it will happen um at the next show. But I'm hoping that Money in the Bank there will be a change because I agree with you. Enough's enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to discuss the developments in the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments. We did see a couple upsets coming, depending on your viewpoint, but some notable highlights I want to talk about from the women's side. Jade Cargill's out of the tournament. How do you feel about that? What do you think?
I was frankly surprised. I actually, if it were me, I would have considered potentially having her face off with her tag partner in the SmackDown final, in the tournament semi-final, with Jade Cargill versus Bianca Belair. The fact that they got Bianca Belair going over Tiffany Stratton, but with an injury, set it up so that Bianca Belair is protected. So even if she lost to Jade Cargill, yes, it can be that sort of partners just one-upped me, which is a very common thing. I don't have a problem with that, but it would have been good to protect Bianca Belair that way. But it looks as if instead this is being used to protect Bianca as she loses to a heel and give some heel heat to Nia Jax, potentially if she wants to worsen the injury or something like that. It was a bit of an anticlimax having Jade Cargill lose via disqualification. I understand why, if she was going to lose, it would have to be via disqualification. But I mean, her young daughter was in the front row as well. It was a little bit of a letdown of a result, and indeed a shock. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to see it, but I think knowing what happened on Raw, I now understand why they've taken the path they have. So I'll get into it a little bit along as well, but I don't hate it, and I think there is the potential Jade could inadvertently cost Belair the match on SmackDown to allow Jax to go all the way to the tournament final, and that could also be another way of sort of uh, planting the seeds of dissent within that tag team. But we'll see where that goes. And then on the men's side as well for the King of the Ring tournament, we had Tama Tonga beat LA Knight and Randy Orton beat Carmelo Hayes to set up those two in the semi-final to qualify for the pay-per-view event tournament final. What do you think about this side of the bracket with them as far as the men's concerned on SmackDown? How did you feel about it?
Look, with Tama Tonga going through that, it just had to be the case, right? Like he needs to make a deep run into the tournament to sell it. Either to win it really would have been the best way to go about it, or not to be in it at all. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it, but I think him going over LA Knight was inevitable. Thankfully, they did protect LA Knight just a little bit by having Solo distract him. So that was quite important because, I mean, we have to protect this guy because he's the future US champion. So we can't have him, looking weak or getting squashed by anyone. That's my thought on that SmackDown semi. In the other SmackDown semi-final, Randy Orton going over Carmelo Hayes. This one, frankly, I would describe it as a win-win situation. Randy Orton going through, taking on Tama Tonga, not a bad result, even him winning and then going through to face off Gunter and putting Gunter over, win-win. Likewise with Carmelo Hayes, if he goes over the 14-time world champion Randy Orton, gives him the big rub after having put over Cody Rhodes on the draft episode. So this would have been a way to reinstate his momentum, potentially even beating Tama Tonga and then going to the final against Gunter. Because Carmelo Hayes, Randy Orton, these are two wrestlers that you can see looking very, very good in defeat. Hayes, because being a finalist is actually, quite prestigious in the King of the Ring. And Randy Orton, because, well, it's Randy Orton. He's established. He can put anyone over and he still looks fantastic. So either of them probably going through into the final against Gunter would have made sense. The only weakness in this booking is the fact that whoever's going to do it, and I think, now that Randy Orton has won, that it's going to be him, is going to have to do so by defeating Tama Tonga and potentially affecting his momentum on SmackDown. Your thoughts, Dimitri?
Well, I think Tama Tonga has not been brought in to be a main event player. He's been brought in to be a good enforcer, kind of like playing the solo role to Solo now being the tribal chief of this bloodline. So I don't mind him losing to Randy Orton because I think he's done the damage. He's doing what he's meant to do, which is come in and leave an impact. He has left an impact along with the bloodline. And I think now they need to think constructurally, what is a more desirable match, Gunter versus Randy or Gunter versus Tama Tonga? And I think because Gunter is a big heel and it's going to be in Saudi Arabia, I think you've got to pair him up with a face and a known name. And I feel like Randy fills those two criteria. So I think that's probably the way to go. But I'm happy with the progression of the tournament, and I think so far they've taken probably the right course of actions thus far, as far as that is concerned. But moving on to Raw, we've already alluded to it, but Gunter has qualified for the King of the Ring tournament final at in Saudi Arabia. How do you feel about that result? Him obviously beating Jey Uso to cinch his place.
Frankly, it was inevitable. I thought. I mean, I thought he was going to do it by beating Ilya Dragunov in the Raw final, but he did so by it was technical submission, wasn't it? It was like a knockout, or did Jey tap? It was very, very close to the end of the episode. It was basically result, ring the bell, signature in the corner, off the air. But he just looks so strong right now, man. Like, doesn't matter that he's not the IC champion. Gunter is in fantastic form, and I really don't want them to mess up his progression. Like, I want this to be a steady build towards him becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. And I'm so excited for it. I think it's going to be fantastic.
And I love that they've kept it going, and I feel like this is a natural accolade to give him because it's like he's slowly bringing himself up to prestige. And we saw what Gunter did with the IC Championship, a very historic title of WWE. He really established it again. There is the potential he can do the exact same with the King of the Ring accolade, which has sort of lacked that prestige and oomph about it for a little while now. I think that Gunter could definitely make that something that's desirable again, something that's coveted again to actually win that tournament if he does pull through and go all the way. So certainly Gunter's really doing a great job in elevating everything around him. On the women's side, we had an upset with Lyra Valkyria beating Io Sky to qualify for the final. What did you think about this result?
Oh, I was surprised. I think I was, and this is going to sound really harsh. Okay, so just hear me out here, and then you can assess if it's justified. Lyra Valkyria is still an up and comer in many ways, right? She's not on the verge of the main event. She's really trying to cement herself on the roster, just as a main roster mainstay. So getting to the tournament final for someone at her level, it feels a little bit as if the ceiling is much easier to break in the women's division. Like it's much easier to climb to the top in a shorter amount of time than it is in the men's division. And there's probably a whole range of reasons for that. But the thing is, she's a former NXT champion. That's that's great. But the thing is, we're not in the era of NXT Black and Gold anymore, where you can be promoted or you can be called up to the main roster and you're ready to enter the main event instantly, right? You still need to cement a reputation, right? Like you've paid your dues. I'm not going to say you need to pay your dues, but you still need to familiarize yourself with the crowd. So having Lyra Valkyria go over instead of Io Sky, who is an established world champion, it's a big deal, right? Like beating world champions should be a big deal. And I'd liken it very much to the booking decision that took place on SmackDown, where Carmelo Hayes put over Randy Orton. It wasn't quite time for Carmelo Hayes to go over. I actually would have been all right with Carmelo Hayes because he's been making regular appearances, match of the night appearances on SmackDown. But I guess without digressing too much, I'm wondering if it's too early for a Queen of the Ring tournament final for Lyra Valkyria when we could have had Io Sky there putting on a banger with another established star or someone who is right on the verge of the main event in the form of, say, Tiffany Stratton, who's got lots of momentum behind her. Jade Cargill, lots of momentum behind her. Bianca Belair, an established star, would have been another way to go. So I'm fearing that Lyra Valkyria versus Nia Jax is going to be a bit of a letdown in comparison to a Gunther versus Randy Orton, which is like super main event level.
Well, I think that's part of the reason I'm okay with this is because for the King of the Ring, you've got Gunther and Randy Orton, neither of which are, say, uh, fresh faces when it comes to that sort of level. So I think giving on the women's side someone like a Lyra Valkyria the sort of it's like the upset um finalist, that person that's really gone above and beyond. I think it is good because it helps elevate them upwards because we're talking about, yes, she's not established, but that's how you do it. Like the way to establish people is to actually give them these sorts of wins and have them progress deep because that's how they do develop a name for themselves. We talk about like the NXT stars from before the 2.0 rebrand and how they usually came up and they seemed like completely ready for it. One of the ways that you can establish that with your new stars is by doing something similar. So I don't hate it. And I think Queen of the Ring as well it's a tournament where like if you know who you want to win it, you need to give them a good opponent. And to me, it seems like they've structured it that they want Nia Jax to win it. So Lyra Valkyria makes more sense as her opponent than Io Sky at this stage because Io Sky is being presented as the top heel of Raw, or at least part of that faction. Nia Jax is being presented as the top heel of SmackDown. So I think that would have been a bit of an awkward match. Not in terms of quality, it would have been a great match, but in terms of that psychology of who do we root for and all that. So I like the idea of Valkyria getting that opportunity.
Well, I mean, if you look at the rest of the set of the two Raw semi-finals, you had Lyra Valkyria going over Zoe Stark. Zoe Stark was a heel. And then you had Shayna Baszler versus Io Sky. Again, two heels, heel versus heel. So if we take as given Nia Jax is going to be the SmackDown finalist in the SmackDown tournament semi-finalist, then Lyra Valkyria was the only way to go, right? But it was booking itself into a corner. Like you didn't really have many options.
I think that also speaks to the Raw women's division at this current moment. Uh, and also I think as well, like when Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill are your tag champions, then they probably were reluctant to give them the Queen of the Ring tournament. Or at least that's what we think. We don't know yet. And I think I might use this as a good segue to go into our predictions for King and Queen of the Ring. This weekend, Thanasi, obviously is the King and Queen of the Ring event, which is going to be in Saudi Arabia. And it's going to have a very interesting proposition for us as predictors, because as things stand, we don't actually know officially what the finals are going to be for the King and Queen of the Ring matches. We know from the Raw side who's won, but we don't know from that. So that's another dimension to add into our predictions. But before we get on to that, I want to open our predictions with the Women's World Championship match between Becky Lynch and Liv Morgan. Now, this is one of those matches that actually feels primed and ready for an absolute banger between two stars in the absolute thick of their rivalry. How do you see this one playing out?
See, I'm torn here because it's the right people, it's the right timing as well, but I don't know if it's the right location for a big time title change. Liv Morgan, I thought, was considered, the front runner to take the belt in the battle royal that occurred after Mami got injured, but a time tested formula of giving the strap to an established star in that sort of moment of need did prevail, and that made sense. But the whole storyline is that we're building towards Liv Morgan going over Becky Lynch at some point. I just think that maybe Saudi Arabia is not the right location for it to happen. Maybe a money in the bank, potentially even an episode of Raw at some stage, maybe. But I can't help but feel that Becky Lynch is going to be retaining at this particular event.
That's very interesting to me. I think that you are right for the most part, and only because in my head I've fantasy booked the possibility of Becky Lynch dropping the title in Scotland to Liv Morgan. Scotland sort of being very close to Ireland, so it could be in theory a type of home ground upset for Liv Morgan to win there. So I think you're right. I think there's more to tell to this feud. And so for that reason, to extend it a bit longer, I've got Becky Lynch going over, just like you. Now that takes us to the next match of the card for us to predict, and that is the triple threat match for the WWE Intercontinental Championship between Sami Zayn, Chad Gable, and Bronson Reed. Now, this one, it feels like there's a lot of possibilities. There are a lot of possibilities as to how they're going to handle it. Which one sparks you the most as it comes to predictions for what's going to happen here?
So I just said a couple moments ago that maybe Liv Morgan would win the Women's World Championship on Raw. Potentially that won't happen, but potentially that Raw title change is in the cards for Chad Gable to defeat Sami Zayn in the next few weeks down the track. I just, he's got some good momentum behind him, but maybe not quite ready for Bronson Reed to be a mid-card champion just yet, as much as I love the big Aussie. But just we're not quite there at the moment. I think there will be opportunities for Chad Gable to get some good heat here because Sami Zayn, Arab of Arab descent, he is going to be the very, very strong babyface in Saudi Arabia. I do think Sami Zayn is going to retain, but I do think also that we're building up quite soon for that big culmination of the heel faction. And as you recall, on Raw, Chad Gable was seen backstage interacting with the Creed brothers, and he was getting chants without music, but he was getting chants of "You suck, Gap, you suck" in the vein, in the melody of what we like to say to Kurt Angle. So I think a Team Gable is in the cards very soon, and with Chad Gable as their leading man as the Intercontinental Champion soon, just not at King and Queen of the Ring.
Well, I've gone against my better judgment, and I'm going to say that the title change happens here, and I'm going to root for Chad Gable because I think he's doing great work, and I think there could be something really cool about he's bringing the Intercontinental title with him back to the States, so that next show he's walking out as the champion and pissing everyone off, and for that to happen overseas, it could even add fuel to the fire. But obviously, Intercontinental Championship, it's in the name. It crosses borders, so maybe they're going to use that for this change, or at least that's what I'm predicting. So go Team Gable.
Well, if I can just add this potentially a little bit of a tidbit, we saw that Otis did he did assist with Chad Gable's victory, but I think that he's going to show his true colors of goodness at in Saudi Arabia, and that's what's going to lead to Monday after the pay-per-view having some kind of a kicking out of the academy. But moving on to the next match.
And on the next match, I wanted to discuss what is probably going to be the main event, and that is Cody Rhodes versus Logan Paul for the WWE Championship. Now, to me, this is the easiest prediction I feel for the entire card. I think that the American Nightmare is going to easily retain here. Obviously, that he'll probably have a good match, but I don't see a world in which Logan Paul can actually defeat him right now. Cody Rhodes all the way. Where are you leaning, Tanase?
Oh, I don't even want to waste too much time talking about Logan Paul, so I'm going to say Cody Rhodes is going to win this match. And I'd also like to do some fantasy booking. I don't want to I want to not take away from Cody Rhodes in this little moment. So maybe heading towards Money in the Bank and Clash at the Castle, some of the potential opponents for Cody Rhodes may be switching now to, say, Randy Orton might be rewarded as the potential finalist. Maybe Carmelo Hayes as another potential finalist. Maybe Tama Tonga is going to be entered into the fray with Solo. Although I do think that might be a little bit early to re-engage the bloodline stuff. But I'm really keen for us to move past this and to see where else we're going with Cody, because you'll have noticed that he's hit the ground running, but as a representative champion, not so much as a story-driven champion, if that makes sense, right? Like we're still waiting, and I don't know if they've got many plans until, you know, whatever the next big phase is, whether it's bringing back The Rock for SummerSlam or bringing back Roman for SummerSlam, something like that. But in any case, once again, reiterating, Cody Rhodes will be going over this weekend.
And I agree with you. I'd love to see him sink his teeth into some good feud, some good rivalry. And I would love for that to be non-bloodline related as well. I feel like we need to give him something outside of that. But we'll see where that develops. All right, well, moving on, let's now discuss the namesake matches of King and Queen of the Ring tournament finals. Let's start off with the Queen of the Ring tournament final. And for these two matches, I want to add two components to the predictions. One is, who do we think's going to actually progress from SmackDown's bracket into that final? And then secondly, who is going to win out of the two finalists? So obviously, Lyra Valkyria is going to be in this match. Honestly, for you, who progresses from SmackDown's side between Nia Jax and Bianca Belair?
Well, you and I are going to have to negotiate on how we're going to be measuring this, because this is how I want to predict it. My first thought, owing to what I assume is a kayfabe injury and the fact that there's going to be a babyface finalist from Raw, I think that Nia Jax is more likely to defeat Bianca Belair than Bianca Belair is to defeat Nia Jax. So I'm going to predict that. When it comes to the actual Queen of the Ring tournament final, I think that Nia Jax is going to win that. That said, we should probably pose this other hypothetical that, assuming I'm wrong and that Bianca Belair goes to the tournament final instead, I still think that Bianca Belair is going to win if she's in the final, right? Like I don't see Lyra Valkyria walking out of Saudi Arabia with the Queen's crown. So if there's a way that we can have the kind of two-step or double dip chance, maybe that would be a good way to even, add in some tiebreakers for us in this particular predictions video. But those are my two predictions for this. What do you reckon?
I think we're going to see Nia Jax qualify for the tournament final. And I agree with you. I think that if she does qualify, she will win it. However, on the tiebreaker situation, now that you've posed it, I actually do see a world that Lyra Valkyria will beat Bianca Belair if she so happens to qualify for the final. And that's purely because Belair is a very much established star of WWE's women's roster. So, with that in mind, I feel like Queen of the Ring won't add too much if it's on her head, the crown. Whereas for Valkyria, I think that would be a huge upset because then we say that in her young career in WWE, she's got huge wins over Becky Lynch and then also two other champions in Io Sky and then potentially Bianca Belair. So for that reasoning, that would be my tiebreaker. But my official predictions of what's going to happen is Nia Jax qualifies and Nia Jax wins the Queen of the Ring tournament.
All right, so
So
let's play it this way: that if if Nia Jax gets through, and then whatever happens, we already have the same prediction. Assuming we get it wrong and Nia Jax does not go through, let's say that the person that gets the point for this one is dependent on the Bianca Belair versus Lyra Valkyria second best possibility. What do you reckon?
agreed. No,
Yeah.
wait.
Silence.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. And now let's move on to the final match to discuss, and that is the King of the Ring tournament final. And likewise, with this, we've got to discuss all the possibilities. Gunter is locked in. We know he's going to be there. Who does he face, in your opinion, Thanasi? Randy Orton or Tama Tonga?
For very similar reasoning to what I have had in the Queen of the Ring final, because the Raw finalist is a massive heel, the only babyface that we can pick from this one is Randy Orton. And hopefully, Randy Orton won't be a babyface for much of the rest of the year. But I do think that he will be going over Tama Tonga here, getting a little bit of revenge after the loss that he suffered in in Lyon, France. Maybe there'll be a bit of a scuffle there. Maybe Kevin Owens going to come out and help Randy Orton get that win, and then he'll have to suffer the consequences later on. But I do see Randy Orton delivering an RKO out of nowhere, pinning Tama Tonga 1, 2, 3, and then heading into Saudi Arabia. Do you agree?
I do agree. I think Randy's the way to go. And I think there's just something incredibly alluring about a Gunter versus Randy match. And I feel like the timing actually is like perfect for something like that to happen. So yeah, I'll definitely love to see that. And then on this situation, then Thanasi, if it is Gunter versus Randy, who wins for you?
Oh, I think Gunter's going to be winning. Well, I think I've been saying that Gunter should win the King of the Ring tournament before he even declared his entry into it. So it's stuck with it now. We've got to keep going with it. And I'm looking at the bracket here. He beat Sheamus in a little over 20 minutes. He beat Kofi in a little under 15 minutes. He beat Jey Uso a little over 15 minutes. So, and all of those were submission victories, right? Sometimes it was a knockout, sometimes a tap. But I think we could be seeing Randy Orton getting choked out, not tapping, but I think we could be seeing him taking a nap in the center of the ring and then lying there as Gunther goes to receive his scepter and crown. That's genuinely what I could see happening. And it's a very tasty contest, right? The 14-time world champion against the 666-day intercontinental champion, Astaghfirullah. So
The
yeah, let's
irony
do
of
it.
that reign as well, 666 days for an Austrian dominant man. Like you can't make this stuff up. I completely agree, and I'm gonna say I don't think we're gonna be able to split ourselves on the tiebreaker either, because in the event Tama Tonga is in the final, I still believe Gunter would win it and assert his dominance in this tournament and put his name down in history as one of the King of the Ring tournament winners. There's a lot to be excited about here, Thanasi. I'm sure you're very excited about it too.
Oh, extremely. Like, how can you say no to 14-time heavyweight champion of the world against the longest reigning IC champion? Like, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be absolutely wonderful.
Oh, well, let us know in the comments below what you think about our predictions, how you think yourself it's going to turn out, and who you believe is going to win. Let us know in the comments below. Well, then that's it. Let's dive straight into the AEW side of things now. And we've got our own pay-per-view on their end to predict, which is Double or Nothing. So let's get right into it. This weekend, we also have AEW Double or Nothing happening. So there's a lot of matches to predict on this card. Thanasi, let's dive straight into it with the opening contest that I want to discuss, and that is the AEW World Championship match between Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage. Who have you got going over in this one?
Well, I can't see any way that we can have Swerve lose the title. This is his first high-profile defense and a really good defense at that. So, it's got some story going into that, dating back to All In 2023, last August. So, I think this is just a good way to give him an established number one contender, an established opponent to set him up really strong for the beginning of his reign. So I'm going with the champion, Swerve Strickland, over Christian Cage.
I completely agree. I wish this was a year or two earlier, and then Christian could have foreseeably won it. I'd love to see him be world champion again, but I think it's too early in Swerve's reign, and this is too perfect of an opponent to sort of give him some credibility early on. So Swerve definitely all the way, in my opinion as well. Now onto the second match, we have Roderick Strong versus Will Ospreay for the AEW International Championship, and I'm going to just step in first here, Thanas, and say my shout might be a bit rogue, but I honestly believe Roderick Strong is going to retain. Probably not clean, but I think he's going to retain the championship and he's going to somehow beat Will Ospreay. I know it's a bit out there. What do you think?
Well, I think it was a stupid idea to put Will Ospreay here in the first place, but I can't bring myself to say that he's going to lose because it wouldn't be the right moment to have him break his streak. Still got a lot of momentum behind him, so we want to keep that going until basically the opportune moment, which I don't think is quite here yet. Potentially, this screw job that you're alluding to may happen, sure, but I think the odds are more in Will Ospreay's favor than against. So I'm going to go with title change.
And that's a very fair prediction, Thanasi. I don't fault you at all. But let's see if you think there's going to be another title change in this match, which is going to be Toni Storm versus Serena Deeb for the AEW Women's World Championship. Now, for me, again, I'm going for a champions retains situation here. I think Toni Storm is still got legs to this reign that needs to be explored. She's still got to go a bit longer. And I think Serena Deeb is just, in this case, perfect fodder to extend the lifeline of this reign. How do you feel about it?
I, with the greatest respect for the Professor Serena Deeb, this sort of a situation is what I like to refer to personally as a transitional number one contender. Someone who's not there to take the belt, but who is there to ideally have a good match and just get us through to the next title defense. So I'm going to have to predict Toni Storm retains here. I mean, I've been saying it for so long that I think Mariah May should be the one to take the championship out of her hands, well, pry them out of her hands, basically. But that's where I see this going. And Serena Deeb is not going to be winning. So let's say Toni Storm.
Next up, we have Adam Copeland versus Malachi Black in a barbed wire steel cage match for the AEW TNT Championship. This one, it sounds like it's going to be vile to watch as a viewer. Very barbaric, which fits perfectly for a barbed wire type match. I think here again, I've been saying it a lot, but I just feel champion retains here. Adam Copeland. What do you think?
I see. Here's the thing with this one. I think the real winner is going to be the fans. But in this particular instance, Adam Copeland hasn't needed the TNT title at all during this whole thing, right? We've got an opportunity here for him to concede the championship to someone who could really use it in Malachi Black, right? So, and I think you can see where I'm going with this. I just feel like it's a really good opportune moment in a high profile bloody match on pay-per-view for Malachi Black to win some singles gold. So I'm actually going to go with title change on this one.
I wouldn't hate it if it happens, Thanasi. I wouldn't hate it. All right. Well, next up, we've got John Moxley versus Konosuke Takeshita in an IWGP World Heavyweight Championship eliminator match, which means that if Takeshita wins, he will receive a future World Heavyweight Championship match. To me, this stipulation is utterly insane for a pay-per-view. The idea of this is a beat the champion, you get a shot at the champion when he's not even a heel. This sounds completely ridiculous to me. That being said, this is what we've got. And it's because of this stipulation that I feel they're going to give Takeshita a huge win over John Moxley on pay-per-view. So I think Takeshita wins here. What do you think, Thanasu?
Here's my thought on this. Mind you, the eliminator match concept, it's an established thing in AEW, right? This is not the first time, but usually it's done on a TV episode to set up a pay-per-view match. In this particular instance, we've got a full-time AEW star going up against another full-time AEW star in an eliminator match for an IWGP NJPW championship. So where is this complex? They're both, well, one's former NJPW, the other one's part-time currently NJPW. So if they are to go up against each other following a Takeshita victory, it would have to happen on NJPW pay-per-view. So it seems like there's a lot of intersectionality here, but there's one very, very good place for that to happen, and that is at Forbidden Door, which is happening in roughly a month's time. So, I was actually I was setting all that to talk myself out of giving Takeshita the victory. However, I feel like just with my own logic, I've talked myself into saying that Takeshita needs to win so that these two can go head to head at Forbidden Door. So, yeah, I'm actually going to go with Takeshita winning here. Probably a dirty finish. But yeah, it just seems like the time is ripe for setting up a Forbidden Door match, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, we'll see how that match pans out. But on to the next match we have to discuss, and this is a grudge match between Trent Beretta and Orange Cassidy. And I feel here that I just feel it would have more weight to it if Beretta won. And that's why I'm leaning towards him. What do you think, Thanasu?
I agree with you. The way that I'm thinking is that AEW does not traditionally do a lot of feuds with multiple matches, right? They try to limit that. And it feels like the appropriate way with their current formula with few pay-per-views is have a lot of the build on TV, make the heel look strong, and then maybe the babyface just wins the culmination of the feud. And that's what's making me head towards Orange Cassidy. But it doesn't feel like we're at the climax of the feud yet, right? So that's the part of it that makes me feel a little bit awkward about it. And until we get to the climax of the feud, the heel really should be looking stronger, should be looking to get victories. But I just feel like they're not ready to push Trent Beretta to the moon, and I'm disappointed with that. Therefore, I'm going to pick Orange Cassidy to get the win.
We'll see what happens. On to the next match we have to discuss. We have a three-way for the world rules match for the FTW Championship between Chris Jericho, the champ, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata. Now, Thanase, this is a very unique situation where we have three men vying for a championship that really doesn't mean all that much on the face of it, but it doesn't mean a lot to Hook. The title's lineage obviously derived to his family. So with that said, does Hook regain the championship here? Does Chris Jericho hold? How do you see it playing out?
Well, it's weird because Shibata does feel like he's been shoehorned into this one, right? Just to make it feel different to the last match. It does feel as if there's a little bit more to get out of this learning tree persona that Chris Jericho has put together. But I mean, it does belong to Hook. Let's be real here. But I think I ultimately am going to predict Chris Jericho to retain, and maybe we'll see a little bit further down the track where this ends up and where he wants to take the learning tree the learning tree faction.
I'm gonna go with Hook. I'd be happy either way, to be perfectly honest. But I don't know. I think that if they get rid of the championship now, there's the potential the learning tree still has legs to it. Whereas if he holds it for a little while, also under the learning tree persona, it would feel almost like once he drops the title, the whole thing would end as well. Whereas if they get ahead of it now, then they can extend the learning tree and just evolve it quite quickly. So I think that's what's leading me to think they might go down that route to sort of give the gimmick legs without having it be about the championship. All right, well, firstly, next match we have to discuss is Bullet Club Gold versus the Death Triangle in a six-man match for the Unified World Trios Championship. For me, I have to support the Bang Bang Gang here. They're my boys, and you know what? If they're going to have a match, on pay-per-view, let's see them retain those championships. What do you think?
I think I'm going to agree with you there. I mean, the Bullet Club Gold, yes, they have not been quite what they used to be. And I really do think that the absence of Juice Robinson has affected them, but it's an easy way to go about it, right? Just makes sense. And the thing is, there's still a lot of potential to the faction, right? Like we haven't squeezed everything that we could be. Like we're not actually tapping into that potential. And since there's still room to grow, to proceed, my only thought is just let's keep it going. So I'm going to agree with you.
Beautiful. Well, let's see if you agree with me on this next prediction. And it is Willow Nightingale versus Mercedes Moné for the AEW TBS Championship. And I don't know, I believe I'm right in saying this is the only match I'm predicting uh, a proper title change for something that has weight to it. Hook obviously is winning. I predict to win the FTW Championship, but here, a title that has prestige and credit to it. I think Mercedes Moné is going to be victorious in her debut AEW match to win this championship. How do you see it playing out?
Frankly, I think of all the matches on this card, this one I would say I'm the most confident in saying Mercedes Moné is going to win in this one. I mean, like it's her debut fixture. Like you can't have her lose her debut fixture. There's so much hype going around it. There's a lot of story here as well, right? Because of the injury that happened in NJPW Strong when she dropped the title. Apparently called an audible to drop it to Willow Nightingale. So there's a lot of substance here. So I'm gonna have to pick Mercedes Moné just like you are.
And on a side note, I just want to say I'm very curious to see how it eventuates after the fact. If this is a match in which letting her win title gold on her first outing is a good idea, or likewise having her lose her debut match is a good idea. I'm curious to see in either scenario if it actually helps or if it sort of becomes a bit of a deterrent within the division. We'll see what happens. But finally, we have what I suspect might close out this pay-per-view, and that is the Elite versus Team AEW in Anarchy in the Arena. This is obviously become one of the staples of AEW Double or Nothing. I think in the last couple of years, I think that this is one of those gimmick matches that is consistent. Team AEW with Bryan Danielson, Cash Wheeler, Dax Harwood, and Darby Allin miraculously back after breaking his foot and getting hit by a bus. Uh, this, I think I think it's fair to say this has the most story going into it, the most intrigue from that standpoint of storyline. What do you think is going to be the final outcome in this match, Thanase?
I like the story framing of it's the Elite versus Team AEW, right? It's like the defenders of honor, right? I really, really like that. And I think there's a lot of potential for this to be just like an absolute banger, bloodthirsty AEW crowds. We saw Darby Allin come out with the flamethrower on Dynamite, right? And
Yeah.
usually crowds like to chant, we want tables, or we're already going to get, we want barbed wire because it's going to happen in the steel cage. Could chant, we want thumbtacks. But tonight this weekend, we're possibly going to have a chant of, we want fire, which the last time I heard that chant was, I think it was One Night Stand 2006. And I think Terry Funk actually brought it out, gave the fans fire. Nevertheless, where I'm going with this is It's going to be like a big sort of deadly kind of fight, and it still doesn't feel like it's the end or it's the climax of this elite takeover. So I think the potentially like that elite takeover may take place later on in the year in Blood and Guts, where a similar Team AEW, maybe not the same four representatives, but a similar Defenders of Honor group will come out to defend the honor of AEW, and that'll happen at Blood and Guts, and that's where the babyface will win. Therefore, for the purposes of storyline advancement, the elite must be winning this one. And I think it's going to be like the first time the four of them are going to be competing as a foursome. So surely you can't have them lose.
Well, I agree. I can't see them losing this one. And to be honest, I don't even want to see them really lose until a long way down the track. I think this is the first time they've got for a potential invasion type story, or, a thing of like, an authority type story is actually more appropriate to describe them. And I feel like you've got to keep it going. So I definitely see the elite winning here, and I'm definitely bracing myself for a very violent match. These things have definitely delivered in that aspect. So I'm very much trying to prepare myself mentally for what is going to happen. And now that we've seen a tease of the flamethrower, I'm terrified that we're going to see it used, and not in a pretty way. But honestly, those are our predictions. And I'm excited for this pay-per-view. I don't know, like, how do you feel? Like, obviously the build's been a bit so and so, but how do you feel now that we're finally here?
I'm actually really keen for it. I mean, I always enjoy a good AEW pay-per-view. Yes, okay, they've got their weaknesses, like they go too hard and too long, sure, but it's double or nothing, and it's going to be a long weekend here. Well, I work in the ACT, so I'm going to have a long weekend, and it just works out really nicely. I can watch it all live, so I'm actually, really keen. We'll get down and dirty and enjoy the cold weather here in the southern hemisphere.
Well, honestly, those are our predictions. In the comments below, please let us know what you think's going to happen at Double or Nothing. If you think we've done well with our own predictions, or if we've cocked it up, let us know what you think in the comments below. Well, Thanasi, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we are going to have a jam-packed episode where we review not just one event, but two. We're going to give our thoughts on everything that happens at King and Queen of the Ring and at AEW Double or Nothing. There's going to be plenty to discuss, and I'm sure that we're going to be completely at complete full capacity when it comes to giving our thoughts. Are you excited for what's going to happen this weekend?
Oh, I am super excited. Like it's going to be a double header of pay-per-views. And like I said last week, I'm even more excited now because all the sporting events are going to be crazy across the world. We're going to have Saudi Arabia is going to have King and Queen of the Ring. The United States is going to have Double or Nothing. Australia is going to have the A-League final. I'm still kind of hurting in my heart that we're not going to have Sydney FC in there, but nevertheless, Scotland, England, Greece have cup finals. Paris is going to be hosting tennis. Roland Garros is starting. It's going to be a very Germany, the basketball Final Four. So around the world, we're going to be having a big sporting weekend, and wrestling is no exception.
Well, firstly, I'm excited for it. Great to have your company as always.
Peace be with you, Dimitri. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.